Hey everybody, just wanted to do a quick cutting room floor video here on the heels of the sermon from this past Sunday. And my intention is twofold. One, I want to clear up an area where I misspoke about the text, right? Anytime I do that, I certainly want to try to correct that if I can. But then two, I want to reiterate what was one of the main intentions of, at least one of the main intentions of the sermon. This might feel like I'm beating a dead horse, but there were just a couple things that couldn't make it into the full sermon for sake of time, but just a couple cautions that I'd like to warn you against in relation to this issue. So first of all, let me clear up something where I misspoke. Right, we're in 1 Timothy 2, and we're looking at that verse 12, where Paul says, I don't permit a woman to teach or to exercise authority over a man. And, I was highlighting a lot of the complexities, even with that phrase, talking about the complexities in the broader passage where, Paul is not just addressing teaching and authority, but he's also addressing women's clothing, women's hair, women's jewelry, or how men should conduct themselves, right? Some things that we don't necessarily apply directly from the text to our present context, right? So there's some complexities there. We talked about the complexity about how he closes the passage and that strange, phrase about being saved through childbirth and what in the world that means. Wide perspective on what Paul is saying there or not saying there. Very important. Okay, but then we talked about also some other complexities that are not so obvious in the text. Here's where I'll grab my sophisticated visual aids. All right, so we talked about how in the Greek this word for exercise authority is actually a very unique word there. Paul doesn't use that word anywhere else. It's not the normal word that you would use to convey this idea of exercising authority, which could indicate that Paul has something else in mind, or at least a more nuanced thing that he's going after there than just mere exercising of authority. Okay, but then here's where I misspoke. I said that this little conjunction here, or, is not in the text, and I was wrong. It actually is in the Greek text. What I should have said is we don't necessarily know how it functions in the text, right? And what I mean by that is, again, this came up where I was talking about how we're not clear if Paul is intending two prohibitions here or just one. Is he intending to say, I don't permit a woman to teach or to exercise authority over man, right? Two prohibitions. Or does he intend just one? I don't permit a woman to teach with an assumed authority. And the reason we ask that is because Paul does this sort of thing where he'll take two clauses, two phrases, link them together with a conjunction, and then he puts another conjunction in there and with a contrasting clause, right? So don't permit a woman to teach, conjunction, exercise authority over a man, other conjunction, contrasting clause, rather, she is to remain quiet. And the thing is, when Paul does that, it is often the case that he's intending the first two phrases to be joined together to convey one concept, right? Or to use the illustration we used on Sunday, if I said this coffee is good and hot, I don't necessarily mean that it's a good cup of coffee. I just mean it's really hot, right? We do that. Paul does that. And so it's legitimate to ask the question, does he intend one prohibition or two? And if it's just one, then it's fair game for a board of elders to invite a woman to preach under their authority. I'll go ahead and highlight one more complexity. If you believe it's two prohibitions, teaching or exercising authority, you have this other issue where this little qualifying phrase, over a man, actually is only linked to exercise authority. It's not qualifying to teach, which means that if he is giving two prohibitions, then then this prohibition to teach is just teach in general, not just when men are present, but period. I don't permit a woman to teach or to exercise authority over man. And the thing is, I don't ever see a church that applies it fully consistently in that way either. People differ with me on that whole perspective. It is what it is. The point is, and here's maybe the bigger issue and the bigger intent of the sermon, it's a complicated issue. It's a complicated text. And this is why you have good, God-fearing, Bible-honoring, Christ-following believers on both sides of the question. And I say that because it seems to me, for some reason, this is one of those issues where we reserve the right to cast judgment, pigeonhole the other side, and then immediately treat the other side based on how we've rendered verdict against them, right? So if you believe that women ought not to teach or to exercise authority in the church, Well, then you look at churches that allow women to teach and exercise authority, and there's this temptation, at least, to label them as, oh, those are the liberal churches, or those are the churches that reserve the right to do whatever they want with the text and apply it in whatever way it feels good to them. Or if you're on that side of the issue and you think women should be allowed to teach and exercise authority just like a man, you would be tempted to look at a Bible fellowship church and think, oh, that's one of those sexist churches. Or that's one of those churches that's still beholden to old abusive forms of patriarchy. Okay, and here's the thing. It's certainly possible, right, that the churches on the one side have a liberal, carefree, disrespectful approach to Scripture in that way. Or it's possible that on the other side you have churches that are maybe have some guys that are sexist or still prefer old patriarchal system. I guess that's certainly possible. But what's also possible is that actually you have people on the both sides that are just trying to be as faithful as they can to the text and are trying to apply the text in a consistent way that is faithful to the way Paul intends, either in that church or in the churches down through the ages. I was watching some of the Southern Baptist, where I was reading some from the Southern Baptist last week. Some of you may have, heard that they're wrestling with the same thing. And I read from one of the prominent leaders there, and he was saying, yeah, the churches that open up their doors and allow women to do this or do that, those are the liberal churches, or that's the gateway to becoming a liberal denomination, or that's the signal indicator that's a church that treats the Scriptures kind of carelessly. And at best, I would just say, at best, that's inaccurate. At worst, it's not honoring to the text. That actually has a whole lot of complexities, and so we have to treat it carefully, which is all to say, just beware of that modern tendency that we do all over the place, that we make everything black and white, we choose our sides, and then we immediately label the other sides, and we judge, we pigeonhole, and then we reserve our right to treat them however we want. You should always be careful about that in the church, because again, as we said on Sunday, what is explicitly clear is Paul's concern, Jesus' concern, that the church, with all of its ethnic and political and theological diversity, would somehow learn to be eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit and the bond of peace, to bear with one another, to be patient and long-suffering with one another, to honor and respect one another. Again, being eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit and the bond of peace. And obviously, this is a complex issue, and obviously I understand that as a man, that it's very easy for me to say that, and it's a much bigger sacrifice oftentimes for women to choose that unity of the Spirit. So we certainly want to keep that conversation open. And like I mentioned on Sunday, please, let's talk. I'm happy to talk. Any of our elders are happy to talk. If there's ongoing questions or concerns or fears that you might have in relation to this. But simple intent in the passage or in the sermon, it's a complex issue. Watch out for the tendency, the modern tendency, to label the other side, to judge the other side, to pigeonhole them, and then to act in ways that actually would grieve the Spirit of Christ, who desires for the church in its unity to be a visual representation of the victory of Christ. So anyway, just wanted to clear up one thing where I misspoke and reiterate that point. Watch out for that tendency to make this an issue where we can call people either liberal and careless or sexist and patriarchal, whatever it is. Give people the benefit of the doubt, be willing to hear them out, and then, if you need to cast your judgment, cast your judgment. But anyway, that's it. Just wanted to share that. Let's keep the conversation going. Thanks.